All right, and we are live. Welcome, Gio.
Hey Aaron, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm looking forward to watching you build something today.
Yeah, we've got some echo. Do you mind muting your Twitch output there? I don't know
Um,
if folks in the chat can hear it as well.
there we go. How about now?
Good. I don't think it'd be a
Okay.
Twitch series without some technical difficulty. So hopefully that was it. So let us know in the chat. Say hello. Hey, Paula. Hey, Ecto. Hey, Steven. Let us know in the chat. I'd love to know if you were here last week. Uh, um, Apparently, Gio was he's impressed enough by what we accomplished last week to come back to teach us again. He's not. He's still got some motivation. So say hi in the chat. Appreciate everyone joining. And welcome to Learn Airtable Scripting. We're going to be here for 2 more weeks, but this is our second session and really excited to dive in. So I think maybe maybe we sit here for a minute, just let everyone join, say hi to folks in the chat. So let us know you're in the chat and let us know what level, like what did you enjoy about last week? Did you do anything since last week? Did you write some scripts since then? Gio, have you been writing scripts since last week?
A little bit. I try and write, a little bit of code here and there when I can. Nothing. I think one out of the four scripts I attempted last week actually turned out to be useful. So the other three were duds.
Were they unsuccessful or were they not useful? Did you
No,
not get to write them? Because that would make me feel much better to know that you set out to write scripts and don't succeed. Because that sometimes is my
well,
experience.
yeah. It was more. I set out to do it. I was like, guys, I did this thing, and people were like, you could have just done this instead. And I was like, yes, that would have been, that is another solution that would have taken less time. I agree. So yeah, no, sometimes I default to scripting when there are probably other easier methods at my disposal, like just a brute force manual approach. But sometimes it's just fun to have an excuse to write some code.
You and I are kind of opposites. Well, we're opposites because I would avoid scripting, like the plague, like some would say. I would never ever script. Now I feel a little more comfortable. So we've got some folks who actually added linked records from another table. That's actually something we're going to do today as well. So you're one step ahead. And so yeah, so I'm excited to join your camp a little bit, Gio, where scripting is no longer something I avoid, but sometimes embrace. Not all the time like you, but definitely sometimes.
That's
Okay,
probably a
cool.
healthy medium to get you to.
Especially for your health. Especially you who probably writing code means potentially getting angry and things like that. So hopefully we're gonna stay calm. Gonna write some scripts today and hopefully succeed, make them useful and successful. Cool. So keep the chat going. I did want to add the fact that a lot of folks last time said, you would sometimes miss a part of scripting or something we're introducing and you came later. So know that you can do exclamation mark scripting in the chat. I'm going to do that now and you'll kind of see what the response is. And then you could kind of get additional information around any of either the Airtable functions or methods. So note that that's available to you. If we're writing something and you didn't quite get it, let us know in the chat, but also feel free to use that exclamation mark slice, filter, find, and that has everything we're going to cover today. So you should find all the resources you need. So with that, welcome. We're officially kicking this off. Welcome back, Gio, to second part of Learn Airtable scripting. We're trying to get to a point where we feel comfortable writing scripts. We're not going to kind of reintroduce why scripting, but I think I'd love for you to kind of chat about what we did last week. And I think you actually shared that with an Airtable client. So I'd love to know why scripting, was interesting to them. And from there, I'll introduce the use case for today and we'll start writing the script.
Yeah, and so last week did the stream, had a lot of fun, wrote some cool code, and then had a use case come up where someone wanted the ability to automatically, as they enter new data into their base, check to see if there were overlapping dates between two records. So does this record's start or end date fall within the start and end date of another record? And started writing out what that solution could look like, what we could potentially do, and realized that it's checking duplicates, right? You're comparing that record to every other record in the base, and rather than checking, is my name the same? You're checking to see if that date is greater than or less than is greater than the start date, but less than the end date of another task. So it is functionally the same as checking for duplicates, which we did last week. So I think there's these sort of archetypes of problems that we see people running into fairly commonly. And checking for duplicates is one of them. So that script sort of outline and template that we came up with last week was reusable for another problem that we saw later that week.
That's interesting. And I think what that makes me think about is this idea that our goal here is not to actually write the script is a goal, yes, but it's those building blocks where you're saying, hey, if you're going to loop over the whole table trying to find records that match certain conditions, well, that is what a duplicate is. It just so happens a duplicate is when the names are the same. But if you tweak just parts of the script we're going to write or we have written, you can realize that the possibilities are a little endless, and you could just think of those building blocks. So you can even say, well, if you want to loop through the table and add a linked record as someone did, that's also possible with a few small edits of last week's script. So in working with Geo to write this week's scripts, what you realize is functionally they're almost the same, right? We're going to use the same methods in slightly different ways. There's a few catches along the way that are different. But once you understand those building blocks of scripting, there's a lot you can do, and it's almost like 80% overlap amongst a lot of those scripts. And you're right, I would not have thought that duplicate and seeing overlap between events or between whatever it is that we're trying to manage is functionally the same script.
Yeah, I think what you'll find is you'll start developing patterns that you fall back onto as new problems occur. There's an infinite way of solving any given problem with code, but as you get familiar with certain patterns, you'll start mixing and matching those and understanding how to get from point A to point B, maybe with like a slight detour along the way, but you'll start developing those core tools that you can start swapping in and out as needed.
Yeah. So we just need one way. We don't need an infinite amount of ways.
You just need one.
We just need one.
Yeah, you just need one that is okay, that gets the job done, and then you can always clean it up later.
Perfect. It feels like how people talk about my cooking. It gets the job done. We just got to clean it up later. It's good.
Yeah. Mine is very similar. So
cool. All right. Okay. So let's jump in. We're gonna write another script today. Our goal is to end in about 50 minutes with the written script. Just word of caution for folks, it's actually going to be the most 99% of what we're covering today is going to be covered from last week. So we're not learning anything new. We're reusing those same building blocks to create a script that feels very different, but is relatively the same. So use that exclamation mark scripting if at any moment something feels unclear. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you, Geo. You guys, everyone here should now see the base. Geo, you should see the base in just a moment here. Gotta figure out, here we go. You should now see the base. And I just need to find and put Geo in the right place. There we go. Geo is now in the right place. Boom. We have Professor Geo. We have myself. Let me know in the chat if you can see the base. Should be up and running. And our first step is going to be checking off the fact that we've done the introduction. So I'm going to go to our checklist. Thanks for folks in the chat letting us know that you can see. Just going to check off that introduction. We've done it. And if I update in the chat, that should refresh. So if you ever see me change the agenda but not update, we can update it that way. Cool. Okay, so today's use case, that's our next step here on the agenda, is we're gonna put ourselves in the shoes of an agency. right? A web agency that does website redesigns, that does SEO restructuring, and we manage all of that client work from our Airtable base. So essentially, we're tracking what projects, the different work items that relate to those projects, our clients. So let me just walk you through the base. We've got our projects. For each project, we have a project type, right? So we manage 3 different types of projects: site migrations, website redesigns, and SEO reviews. Then we have which client that project is for, what status it's in, and those pesky, I'm going to call them pesky action items, because that is kind of the pain that we're facing, Gio. So we've got some work items. For instance, we've got this Chaka site migration, which is a CMS migration, and we've got our 4 action items. And these are always the same. So every time we do a site migration, we have to review the CMS structure, confirm switch date, change DNS configuration, and renew the domain. For folks who are developers, I made this up, so I'm sorry if those are not actually the steps related to a site migration. And what we're struggling with, Geo, is that, we know every time we do a website redesign what the steps are. And what we'd like to do is just automatically create the right action items or the work items for that specific type of project, right? And what we've done before is we have a request type, right? So these are the 3 possible types of projects that we manage.
Yep.
And then we have template items, and then we're just copy pasting, right? It's a little bit tedious because sometimes we forget and things like that. And so, Gio, can you talk a little bit about why, how would we solve this? What are some ways we can do that in Airtable? And maybe leading question here, why is scripting the way we're going to solve it today?
Yeah, I think for a lot of these types of workflows, right, you have this very standard if this then that type logic flow that you want your process to move through. The decision points that you want your users to make are what is the type of project, but you want your application to be able to tell them, well, here is the set of action items that you need to do in order to complete that project. Those action items aren't changing. And so what you currently have is really, opportunity for error where someone can potentially copy the wrong set of action items and they can miss an action item. And so the goal here is to streamline that process for your users and also ensure just a level of like data cleanliness and guardrails to make sure that everyone is actually accomplishing the action items that they need. And so anytime you have that kind of, I'm doing something very manual today, or I want to start putting in a little bit more guardrails or enforcement into how data moves through my process, those are all really good opportunities for scripting specifically, because your script becomes those guardrails and that logical path for how data moves through your application.
Right. But, historically, or not historically, I mean, since September or mid-September when we launched this, for me, what I would probably do is just do an automation, right? Where I'd say, okay, if it's this type of project, we have these action items, I can just create 4 or 5 actions in Airtable automation that specifies what those are. So I guess with the quick question before we jump in is like, why would we use script over that automation?
Yeah, I think when you have 4 or 5 tasks, and maybe this is an example where like, yes, an automation would get the job done. Right. For 4 or 5 tasks, that may actually be the faster path forward. It's not uncommon for people to have tens to hundreds of action items for a given project. Creating an automation in which you specify one by one all of those tasks or all of those action items for every project becomes incredibly tedious. It is the nice thing about scripting is you get a level of scalability out of it. The logic and process is the same regardless of the number of elements that you want to put into that process. So scripting gets you a further degree of scalability than manually setting up each action through an automation would.
Got it. And also, I think what we'll see with scripting is that the adding and removing of action items is much easier and much more fluid. So even if you have a process that's not quite set in stone and you can just go ahead and add a record, remove a record from the template items to kind of change your process. So there's a fluidity to it as well. But frankly, you're right that probably in this instance where we only have 4 or 5 action items per project, automation might be a good case. However, you're right that if we get to 50, 60, 70, quickly we're going to kind of overload that automation.
And to your point, right, like as you increase the number of project types that your team is able to take on because you've gotten more efficient at solving those because you have an application like this, having this sort of setup gives you that flexibility to grow over time very easily. You're inserting a new record rather than trying to set up a new automation, which I think can be a little bit more, it has more overhead associated with it.
All right. So there was an ask in the chat to share the base. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to give a read-only link. And if you want to write a script at the same time as us, go ahead. That lets you copy the base. And at the end, I'm going to share that link as well. So you'll have the script in it as well. So feel free to go ahead and copy that into your workspace as we start writing the script. So we've done an overview. We've got project, work items, and our project types are 3, and then we have template items, which are those tasks or work items for each type of project. Let's actually group this by project type like that. There we go. That makes sense. So SEO review, 3 action items. Site migration, there are 4. Same thing for website redesign. And now we're going to go ahead and write a script that when I add a new project, I associate a type, I associate a client, I can go ahead and automatically create the action items based on that project's type. So let me know in the chat if the use case makes sense. Give me a little thumbs up. Maybe give me a thumbs down if it doesn't. And if you understand what the high level of what we're about to do here makes sense to you. And if this is something you've encountered, I'd love to know as well. So as you write that out, I'm going to go ahead and check off like this. So we've done the agency use case overview. So all right, let's jump into our favorite part, the main event. We've got our script dashboard. Let's install an app. And we're going to add the scripting app. Install that. All right, let's skip that. We are in the editor. And Gio, we're going to start this off as we start off, or how we recommend to start off every single script. What is our outline? What steps are we going to take in this script?
Yeah, so I think in this case, right, and we kind of walked through that logic earlier, is I have a project, it's been assigned a type, I want to be able to select that project, understand what type of project it is, find the tasks, the action item templates for that project type, and then duplicate those templates into live action items.
Okay, let me reread that because I had to type it. So I don't, like, sometimes you type it and you don't understand.
I went a little fast. Yeah.
No, it's okay. Let me read that back to you. That's a good way of doing this. So essentially we're going to, in the script, when I click run, we're going to be like, hey, here are projects with no action items, right? So like we're actually going to, the user is actually going to input which action items, which project needs action.
Right, which project needs
okay.
its action items assigned.
And then the script is going to go and say like, okay, go to the template tasks, right? The template action items, work items. Find all those that match that project, right? So here I would say find action items that match the project type that the user selected.
Correct.
So then after that, we're going to go ahead and take those action items and duplicate them in the action item base. The template ones, move them over, copy them into the template live action item. Does that make sense?
Right.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
we want to duplicate may not be the right word, but I think we're copying their data and creating a new set of records off of them. It's duplicating. I take that back.
It's funny because
That
I
is
know
the
that
right
like
word to use.
this is your developer is like, oh, it's not the right word, but for me
Yeah,
it feels right
it's
as
the
an
right word.
outline. Okay, cool. All right, so my memory from last week is like we need to this user input. We haven't done that from last week, right? But everything else feels like the word find should resonate for folks who came last week. Duplicating means creating records, slightly different than what we did last week. We updated records, but the structure is going to be relatively simple. So these, hopefully, in writing out the steps, this starts ringing bells in I'm sure it's ringing bells in your mind, Gio. But for folks joining, I hope we start kind of seeing the steps in the different things that we're going to use from last week. So, Gio, I imagine here we're going to have to like declare some base.get table, things like that. Like, how do we start this off?
Yeah, so I think in general, the first thing you want to do is select the sort of initial table that you want to read information from.
Okay.
This is very much sort of the starting place. So
we're going to
in this
projects.
case, yep.
Yep. Projects dot await. No await.
No await on this one.
Okay. So we're just going to the base. We're going to get table. I remember this from last week. And we're going to go get the projects table. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. But this isn't the input part, right? This
No,
is just
we're not quite at input.
Okay. We're not the user. Okay. So how do we actually get to the point where the user can select the different projects that have no action items?
Yeah, so in that case, they're similar to base. We have a special object in the scripting library called input, and it's got a helpful set of functions that allow you to request input from the user. So in this case, I think what we want to do, if you want to go look at the developer docs down there at the bottom, this shows you all of the different options that you have for input. So you can ask for sort of free-form text from the user. You can present them with a set of button options. So you can say yes, no, more like a single select. And then I think the one that we want is going to be further towards the bottom, which is
right here.
So I think it's all. Keep going.
Keep going.
Record async.
Record async
is the one that we want. Yeah. So
we
want to present a set of records to the user.
Right.
And allow them to select from that drop down, because we're saying, hey, we need you to pick a project. And that is the project that we will then operate on in the script.
Okay, so let's just read through these parameter names. So label, that's what we're going to ask, like, hey, you need to pick a project. That's what we're going to put at the top.
Right.
A source, it could be our table. It could be a view that we're passing in. So we can pass in projects. And then there's kind of options and fields that we want to show. But let's keep to these main ones, right? So label, source, those are the two.
Yep.
To Gio, do we want to pass in the whole table or a subset of that table?
I leave that up to you. I think there's benefits to both. I think anytime that you can sort of limit the scope of what a user has to select from, the better. So in this case, I think we can limit it down to a view. Do you already have a view that it only has projects with no action items?
One thing we didn't do last week, we can actually hide this. Let's make this a little larger so we can actually code and see the base with this in the side. So in projects, I got projects without tasks. Cool. And I'm filtering and saying where action items, that linked record that says whether or not there are action items, is empty. So I've got these four, and that's probably what I want to show up in the input. So how do I go about doing that?
Yeah, so we first need to select the view from the base. So it's gonna, let's call it projects view equals projects dot get view. and then the name of the view. Yep.
Cool. And for folks, what I'm writing on the side like this, just when we're looking at base, is it clear enough for everyone? Are you able to see? Just let me know if it gets a little squished. I'm happy to go back to full screen mode, and I will when we run the script in just a moment. So now, okay, we have that view. Now what we want, so let me actually go back to full screen so we can see that documentation.
Sure.
So we said record async. How do we structure this?
Yeah, so for this, we're going to present a label
Okay.
to the, and what it's going to return to us is the selection from the user. So let project equal
Input.
input record async.
So just as a moment here, if you want to folks to select a view, input text, a file, a record, a button. So just note that you have other options of inputs that are not just the record, right? So what you want for us to output is a record. That's what the user is selecting. So async, like that.
Yep.
Right. And then the first
then
is a
first
label.
Option, yeah. So select project, just helper text so that the user knows what you're asking them for.
Select project to create action items for. There we go.
Yep.
Okay.
And then a comma.
Yep.
Yep. And then the source, which in this case is our project view. So we only want to allow the user to select records that are in that view.
Okay, so I'll console log it. Let's do it once. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, I missed something. What?
The function ends in async, so you need...
Damn. The one thing I needed to remember from last week.
I know, you did it earlier, and I told you not to. So, but yeah, await. So anytime it says async, we should await it.
It's embarrassing. That was the one thing that folks remember from last week.
It's okay. You're also missing a couple semicolons, but I'll let you get off. So if we do...
Oh, my God. There we go.
It doesn't matter. Some people are purists about their semicolons. I forget them regularly. So we go ahead and do run.
Cool. So we've got our label here.
Yep. And asking you for...
Okay, so now let's say we want to create action items for Helen's of Toys site migration.
Yep.
So it returns the ID and the name. That's how we know, that's like the record format that we're familiar with. So now we know which project we want to create action items for.
Correct.
Okay, cool. So I think that's actually like step one, right?
Yep. So you've completed step one. We've gotten that input from the user to know which project we are taking action on.
Cool. Okay. So then, let's actually go back to the base and talk through how to do this step, because it's not that obvious to me. So we want to go ahead and find the action items that match that project type that the user selected. So let's kind of just, before we write any code, make this a little smaller, and we'll get back to it in just a moment. So we selected Helen's of Toys. The type is a site migration, which is that template request type right here, right? Site migration. And we have 4 action items that are always associated to that. So if I go to the template items, site migration. So what I'm understanding we're going to do, maybe Gio, correct me if I'm wrong here, is that we're going to go to template items and we're going to, filter all of these records to only those that have the project named site migration. This is kind of the link between the two. Is that right?
That is. So in this case, all of your template items know which sort of template request type they belong to. And so we can go straight to the template items and say, give me everyone who belongs to site migration. And that is the set of action items that we then want to copy over into our work items table.
So the output of this second step should be one record, let's say record, that in our array to site review CMS structure, confirm switch date, that would be number 2, change DNS configuration, renew domain, and then, the right single select for that one. So that would be kind of, we're trying to get to these ones.
Yeah. So the output of this should, like you said, should be sort of 4 objects that have the same data as these 4 records.
Got it. Okay, cool. Steven has a request, which is change the project, I imagine, to request type. That makes sense. So it's confusing. Let's do that. I am terrible at naming fields, despite spending my whole day in Airtable, and I appreciate any recommendations for better field names.
It's linked to the request type table, not to the project table, but it works.
Okay, so I guess the question then is, how do we go ahead and filter the template action items to those that match the right project type, request type?
Sure.
Request type now. Yeah.
It's not dissimilar to what we did with finding duplicates. We're going to need to load all of our template items. We're going to need to fetch all of those records. And then we're going to need to compare their request type field to see if it matches the request type of the selected project. And if it does, then that is a record that we want to work with.
Okay, so I'm going to write that down. I got ahead of myself here because I know how to do this. There's 2 things I know how to do, and loading the records is one of them. So essentially, first we're going to load. I'm going to keep these like this so we know that's the same part of the same section. So we're going to load all the records from the template, items table. So template items. We're going to go and get table. And we're going to go and get the template items.
Template items. Yep.
And I know that an await is coming. So I got to go. So I'm going to call this table. So we know that it's a table. And we're going to call template items, the records themselves, equal await, right? Template items table dot records async. There's select
records async.
There we go. Select records async.
So you don't need me anymore.
There we go. I need you, Gio. Don't leave me now. This would be very embarrassing.
My job here is done.
The you leave. It would be a really weird 25 minutes where I'm just trying to fumble through this. Okay. So let's console log that. How does that feel? Let's console log template items. Right? Okay.
You don't need quotes on it. Otherwise, you're just going to output the string template items. It would work. See? I don't think that's what you were trying to do.
See, I was trying to be independent. That's what I get. Okay, Helens of Toys migration. Okay, so we get an array. Cool. This is the second one. 11 records. Those are all the template action items. So the question, which is, when do you decide to use console log? I think I'm equipped to answer this one, which is all the time. Console log is like, it's kind of like, what is happening? So I personally highly recommend using console log as much as possible to understand what is going on in your script. I know, Gio, you have a better answer.
No, that is a very good answer. Is anytime you're trying to figure out what's happening. So I use console log when I get a little arrogant, and so I write a bunch of lines of code and say this is going to work first try, and then ultimately it doesn't, and I go back through and I enter console log to figure out, okay, how is data being manipulated through my script. Within scripting, and maybe this is something we can show later, similar to input and how we allow you to capture input from the user, there are functions for output. So you can also output information in a prettier way than console log does for the user, to let them know how the script is progressing. Console log is often more geared towards the developer who is trying to figure out, why did something break?
Okay. Yeah, well, let's do an output near the end if we have some time. I think that's a good example. Cool. Okay. So we have now, how, I guess the the natural question, Gio, is okay, well, which one of these have the project type, right? Because all I see is I have a record, I have the review CMS structure, I know that that's part of site migration, but how do I do this?
So we're going to need to loop through all of the records
Right.
and filter this down to just the ones that have that are associated with the site migration template. In order to get at that cell value, there's a function for that which we used last week, which is get cell value. And so what we think we want to do here is for all records, use filter to compare their request type field to the request type field of the project we selected in the first section.
Got it. Okay. So let me rename my variable. This is also something I'm going to do. We're going to call this all template items, right? Or
good call. Because now we're going to take a subset of them.
Yeah. So we're going to call this template items, right? And we're going to say essentially take all template items. I'm trying to do this. I'm testing the waters here, Gio. I'm testing the waters.
Yeah.
I click dot.
When in doubt, give it the dot.
So we want the records.
Case, we want the records. Yep, the list of records.
Right, which is this right here.
Yep.
And then that's what we want to filter on. So we want to loop through all of these. Okay. And then if I remember correctly, and I need to name the record or the object that we're looping on, which I'll call template item. So I'm taking this one by one. So it's first going to do this one, then it's going to do that one, then it's so on and so forth. This, which I don't know how to call this, but this is what it has to do.
Literally called an arrow.
Oh, arrow. Good. I like it when it's squiggly to say what happens.
Squiggly brackets. Yep.
Squiggly? Is squiggly the official name?
It's curly, but
squiggly. Okay.
I'm partial to squiggly.
And here, okay, so I have to check whether template item dot get cell value, which is I'm gonna go get the project value, right? So request type.
Yep.
Triple equal
equal
this right here. So this first console log, which is the project, that's the one the user has selected. So I have to go project dot get cell value as well. And in this one, it's going to be the type. So before we run this, let me just explain what this one does in the base, how I understand it, right? Maybe I'm wrong here. So we're going to loop through each one. So we're going to take this one. We're going to say, is the request type the selected project's type? So SEO review, we've selected Helen of Toys, which is a site migration. It's going to be no. It's going to go on, so on and so forth. And it's only going to say yes to these four. And we're going to have an array of those four objects or records in template items. Okay, does that make sense to folks? Let's try this. Let's console log.
On line 17.
Yeah.
Once you do your console log, you need a return. I think you need a return.
Do I need a return?
Well, let's run it. We'll find out in your console log.
Yeah. Okay. Pick a record. Oh, okay. So I've console logged empty. You think, is that because of the return?
Yeah, let's try return first. I have to go look this up every time I do arrow functions and curly brackets. I think when you do the arrow with curly brackets, you always need the return.
Got it. Still empty.
Still empty. So I think what if we just console log? What do we just console log this, so we figure out what this output is? Yep.
And then console log what the other one is. So let's just, before the return, let's console log So see, I don't remember who asked the question in the chat, but console log is your friend. So we're console logging the first one. And essentially what I'm thinking is that these two should match. What the script is telling me is that they do not for some reason that I am oblivious to. So console.log. Okay. So we should have, 12 outputs, right? Let's try that.
You should have 22 outputs
22 outputs.
because there's 11 and you're doing them twice.
Okay. So this is a site migration. So these match,
Yeah.
right?
So welcome to JavaScript. What it is telling you it's outputting is a list of records.
Oh, okay.
And comparing equality on lists is difficult. And so JavaScript here is not helping us. The computer is not helping us. It does not understand what we are trying to do. So we need to give it a little bit more direction as to what it is that we are comparing. In this case, we know that the project names should be the same, right? Like we can see that in the base that when the project names are both site migration, that is what I want what I want to action on. So in this case, it is sometimes helpful within scripts rather than trying to use like the full underlying record object and sort of list notation that we provide to just make everything text. And so instead of using get cell value, what we can do is get cell value as, it's another function that you've got at your disposal called get cell value as string.
Oh, okay. Okay. Get cell value as string.
So what this
instead
will
of returning,
now,
it'll sorry, if I'm let me just read this. Instead of returning like the ID and the name, it's just going to return SEO review.
Correct.
Oh, okay. Okay, that makes sense. So now
a little bit more streamlined.
We know that it's going to match.
Well, let's run it first, but I'm feeling confident.
I'm not, Gio. I never feel confident running these scripts. But okay, let's console log template items, which is the output. Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah, there are some times where it's useful to work with the underlying list. This is not one of those cases. We know that what we're trying to match on is the name. So let's just force everything to text and do our comparison that way. And you came back with 4.
4, which is what we expect, right? Because Helen of Toys is a site migration.
Yep.
And in here we have 4. So these is correct. This is what we're looking for. So that filter works.
We should check the records because
you're right.
Yeah, just as an extra
review
check.
CMS structure. Confirm switch date. Okay, those are the CMS migration request, like action items right here. So that completes that step. Okay, that was actually relatively good. Good job. Good job, us. Good job, you following along. Go team. You're doing good.
And so, right. So now we've got the list of action items. So we now know what the action items for a site migration are. Or we always knew. Now our script knows what those are. And so we now need our script to take some data from those records and make them available to the next part, which is creating those action items in the work items table.
Okay, so it's taking this, right? So taking review CMS structure, like taking this array of objects, trying to get the lingo here, and then going over to work items and saying, okay, go ahead and create records that match the information we have in these records. Now, let's just think about what we're transferring. We want to transfer the name.
Yep.
So let me coming here. So we want action item to be the name from the template items table. Status should be backlog. The
Always.
project, we should. This agency doesn't actually do any work. They've only got backlog action items.
They only have backlog? Okay. All right.
There's
Works for me.
possibility for work in that there's other statuses that are possible, but agency's getting off the ground. Let's give them a break. And then we have to link back to the project. This is the initial project, not the project type.
Correct.
And then the team that's responsible, which is a single select, which is also in the template items as a single select. So we want to kind of take this value and, have that same value here. And that's it. So those are the fields we should be thinking about. So let me template action item, and we want to associate to the right project, and then copy over the team that is responsible. So those are kind of just high level reminders. Don't start fights in the chat, Gio. If folks want to,
sorry,
folks want to use squiggly brackets, that's okay. If you want to use curly braces, we are.
I hadn't even picked up. I read that as curly brackets. I didn't even see it was curly braces. Squiggly brackets is actually much further from the truth than I realized.
All right. So I know that we need a table that is going to have the information to create those records, right? So I know that's the first step, is to create a new array that not only has this information, but that also has those fields that we want to map over.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
If we go to the documentation and let's search for create records. So this is telling us what we need in order to create new records in a table.
Right.
So we need an array of objects, or key value pairs, that are where the keys are the names of the fields in that table, and the values are the values that you want to insert. So we need to take the existing set of work items and transfer it into this format so that we can create new records in the work items table.
Got it. So if we were to just move this, it wouldn't really work because it's not in that right format. So like name, review CMS structure, in this table, you can't just input the name. So it would fail. So that's why we have to adapt a little bit to this new table to create. So let me just find that again. So it's create records async.
Yeah. So what you're seeing in that console log is how scripting is representing an existing record.
Right.
How we represent our script, what a new record should look like, looks a little bit different. And so we need to take the existing records, transform them a bit, so that we can then create new records from their data.
Okay, cool. Okay, so let action items, we're going to call this action items, equal. I feel like we're going to use map, because map is just what you use before you create or update records, right?
Yeah.
But
map
why?
Is super useful. All hail map, I think, is a common like JavaScript programmer slogan. So what you without map, what you have to do is you have to create a list and then do a for loop or a while loop if you're crazy, and iterate through each item and then push data into the list that you created beforehand. So it's very doable, but there's a lot of boilerplate associated with it. Map distills all of that down into one action. So rather than creating a new list and a for loop and tracking your way through that for loop, you use map because it gives you the same output. At the end of it, you're left with, you have iterated through all records in an array, and you are given a new array based on the actions that you took on each of those items.
So I know folks really enjoyed the MDM when I pulled that up. So essentially, Map lets you take an array. In our case, that's
Yep.
going to be those template items. And then we'll call this like run a function. So do something with them.
Yes.
In our case, we're going to reformat. We're going to take that ID, go get some information, format it in a way that, we can then create the records in the other table. And then that's just what we send to create records async. Is that kind of understanding it right?
Yes.
Cool. Okay, cool. Let's do it. Map. Our favorite. I'm in team map. I love map. I learned about it last week.
Map?
I love it this week. I'm team map.
All right, good.
Template items.
Yep. So
That's map. Okay. So template item. Again.
Yep.
Right. Arrow. We can do squirrely brackets. Why not?
curly braces.
Curly braces, whatever.
Curly brackets. Yeah.
Okay, and now, so what are those elements? So let me just think about here. It's that fields thing. We got to do the fields thing. This. We got to structure it in
So
this
if you look
way.
at that example there, so we need a list of objects where the first key is called fields, and that points to another object where the keys are my field names in that table, and the values are the values that I want associated with it.
Okay, so just so folks understand, this is what we're going to use in just a moment, which is create records async.
Yep.
And what that takes as an input, right, as like, how do I create these records, is this, I'll call them this thing right here. So what we want the output of this map to be is to be similar to this. So we're going to start saying, okay, well, fields, right? So do I need a return?
Let's do a return just to be consistent. We could probably get away from it. Return, and then we're going to need another set of squiggly brackets.
Okay, and
right?
that's going to
and
be
then,
the kind of object thingy.
Yeah, right, exactly. So, and then fields, right? So this is matching that format that you can see in the documentation. So you've got your outer squiggly brackets, fields,
right
more
here.
curly braces. Exactly.
Okay, so let's actually, I think at this moment, it's easier to look at these fields here. So my first field is action item.
Correct.
Right? So action item, case sensitive, I think.
Right.
2 dots. And what do I want to put in action item? It's the value of name, this right here.
Yep.
From template item, because template item is these four site migration kind of action items. So template item dot name. No, get cell value. Or dot name would work as well, but get cell value feels better.
Get cell value. Yeah, let's do
value.
get cell value
Of name.
Yep.
No, and then we need a comma to say what is the next field.
What is the next field value pair?
Status.
Okay.
Status. Do I just say backlog?
No. So in this case, different field types in Airtable need their data structured a little bit differently.
Okay.
So for single select values, what we actually do is, if you pull up the docs again, this is actually probably the best way to show it. And you do single select, it's going to show you what the read and write format for data looks like.
Okay.
So when I read data out from a single select, it's going to give me an ID, a name, and a color. When I write data back, I either need to give it an ID or the name, in this case, the sort of the value that you see in the base, in order to write that data for that record. So
do I need to do another one of these? Like a squiggly sideways mustache is the new squiggly fields
Yeah. So it's not fields in this case. So if you look at the right format
right here.
in the
Yeah.
documentation, right, you see
Oh,
how
name.
it's name followed by a value.
So name backlog. That's where I put the backlog.
Yes.
Got it. Okay, and then comma after this because it's saying like that's the second field that we're inputting.
Correct.
Okay, cool. Okay, coming back. So we've got backlog. That's step 2. Project. Project is the third. That's enter. Project. And then that is coming from project initially. This is a
Yes.
throwback. We haven't touched this one in a while, which is...
And so in this,
Yeah, go for it.
it's called, I think the variable that you got is called project. And so in this case, when you're doing linked records, similar to single selects, there's a specific way that scripting wants you to pass that data to it. And so I believe in this case, we'll want to wrap that in square brackets because linked record relationships are always an array of records that I am associated with. In this case, it's just one, but you can link to multiple records oftentimes in Airtable. So you always want to represent that as a list.
Okay, cool. That makes sense. So we're essentially just saying take project, wrap it in an array.
Yep.
And just we got about 4 minutes here. I remember we went over a little bit yesterday. So
Yeah.
we won't go too deep into this, but just remember that if you're linking a record, wrap it in
It should be a
brackets.
list.
It should be a list. So the last one is team responsible, which is a single select. So we can just go ahead and take template item, get cell value, right? So getting this right here, team responsible, get cell value, and then team responsible, right? That feels right.
In this case, again, it's a single select. So you want to represent it in the same way that we represented backlog. But in this case, it's not hard coding the value to one setting. You want to apply the same setting that I had in the template items table.
So essentially, you're saying here we have to do the little like this.
Yep.
And then say that the name is going to be get cell value dot. Do I have a dot here? Dot.
Yep.
Name.
Dot.
Name.
So I want so when I read single selects, I have that ID name color. In this case,
right here.
I don't want to write the color, right? My color I don't actually care about. It's the name attribute about that single select that I care about.
Got it. Okay, I think I either have a missing.
You're missing I think you need one more closing curly brace after team responsible.
Oh, right here.
Yep.
Okay, this is for all my fields. Okay, that feels right. Okay, let's console.log action items. We're almost there, folks. We got this. Let's run that. Pick a record. I don't have toys. Okay. So this has more. It feels very much like the one we console logged before. It has 4, but it has more information.
It still has 4 records because we looped over each one, but now the format of it is very different. This is the format that we need in order to now go create those records associated with that project.
I think there's a good question in the chat that says, wouldn't, instead of just using name, just like what we did in project, wouldn't everything match? Wouldn't the ID, the name, and the color match? And why don't we just say team responsible like I did with template item dot, just get cell value team responsible. Wouldn't there be an exact match?
The IDs are different. So the IDs for a single select are specific to that field. And so while the names may be the same, the IDs are different, which is why you can't just do get cell value. You could have here done get cell value as string. That would have returned the name, right?
The name, okay.
So that's another way of getting to the same place here.
Okay, cool. So I can't imagine how many like time people like myself have spent trying to probably debug this thing. So I'm glad that we went through it. Cool. Okay, so now we have our kind of records, quotes, I guess, that we then want to create records. So like these are the records that are in the script, if you will. Now we have to actually go ahead and create the records. Am I right?
Correct. So now we just need to drop these into write. There's only 4 of them. So if we want to skip the while splice logic that we did last week, we can.
Okay, so in that case we want to let's create record. Let me find it. I can do this. Create records async.
Right. Now, in which table are we trying to create records?
Work items.
And I don't think we've created a work items variable.
No, we haven't. Let me come back and see here. So first is let work items table equal base.getTable. And then here it's work items.
Work items.
And then we want to create await.
Yes.
Create records async. No, we got to actually go to work items table. That's where we want to create the records. Create records async. And then here I'm understanding I pass the records. With our records for us is the output of here. So action items. That can't be it.
That should be it.
Really? This feels
so.
Easier than expected. Okay. Moment of truth, folks. Moment of truth. Okay. Let's run. Pick a record. Toys of migration. Okay.
No errors. Doesn't mean it worked, but it didn't fail either.
Oh, right here. Look at that.
And there they are.
Okay, review this. Boom, backlog. Link to the right project.
The project has the right team responsible.
Okay, I think we can drop a little success in the chat. And have a little bit of confetti. So I don't know if you're clapping. If it wasn't for the mic, I'd be clapping. So myself, I'm like shocked that we did it right on time too. So yeah, I'm actually a little. So let's just do that for the other ones. Let's just understand. So now all we have to do.
So if you rerun it, we shouldn't see Helen of Toys anymore, because it's no longer in that view. So the user can't select it because you've already assigned work items. So now we only have 3 that we need to put in our backlog. And you can see they've been assigned, and now that record is out. And now you've got 4 more records in your agency backlog.
I'm very proud of that hour.
You should. I was well done.
I'm very. It's so much fun. I'm a little. Okay, so let's just do it for the other 2. One more. Let's do it for one more. So let's run again. Jolly Beauty. There we go. And now we have those work items.
Yes.
We did have I remember you said something about before joining that we could improve this a little bit with, like instead of having that input as a user, we could have potentially like a button that says like create action items.
On the project? Yeah.
Yeah, how do we do that?
It's a very quick change here, or should be. So if we create a new field, one of the fields that Airtable has is a button field. From a button, you can trigger a script. So rather than having the user go to the sidebar, run the script, select the record, we can have a button on the project that when they click it, creates the set of action items for that project.
Okay.
So we do create action items. Yep. We'll go find us a button.
So
and then let's call it
create action.
Create. Yeah.
Let's give this a green. Action.
The action we want is to run a script. And then it's going to ask us, okay, which script do we want to run when this button is pressed? So I can click script because that's the dashboard. And then the only script you have in that dashboard is scripting.
We should name that better. Sort of.
It's all good. You only have one of them. So now if we click save,
Okay. Do I just click it? Could I click it?
yeah, if it errors, we'll deal with it. Let's go ahead and click it.
Whoa.
And it ran. So really what that does is it skips the waiting for the user to pass in a record to this script in order to go and auto assign the set of action items. Because you click that button on that record, we already know what record you're trying to take action on. And so that's a very easy way to expand the set of, or to make that a little bit easier for your users. So rather than having to run and then select, they can just go to that record and click run.
Awesome. Well, yeah, that was super cool. So so you create it as an input, and then the button just kind of overrides it, if you will, or just knows what to do.
Yeah. So we've now assigned for all of our projects, we have created.
Yeah, we are all action items, and so note that
action items.
So, for folks, like, why would you do this? Now I can even like add action items here, and they're automatic. Like the script will just pick it up. I can add project types, request types, willy-nilly, frankly, and then the kind of the script will scale. And if I ever add something else that I track, I just have to do a few edits in the script to then migrate that to work items. So maybe things like how much time should that action item take? Who should be responsible for it? What are the sub action items that are kind of come from that action item? So really, it's kind of like this neat base, and it's using everything we learned last week. So we only learned input and create records async this week. Everything else was from last week. So with that, Professor Gio, thank you so much for coming back. I'm excited to do this again next week. Thank you, everyone in the chat, everyone watching. Appreciate you taking the time. If you are kind of, let's go back into like this. And so, folks, I know, Gio, you stream at The First Pancake. So drop the link in the chat if folks want to kind of see Gio stream. He might swear sometimes, so we apologize for that in advance. Know that that might be the case. And we noticed that today. So I also stream at Automate All the Things TV. Weekly, we did some base design yesterday with Victoria. So usually things with Airtable, and we, above all, have fun. So I appreciate all of you coming. I hope to see you next week back here. Next week, we're actually going to use automations. So we're going to take our existing scripts and put them into automation so we never have to kind of manually trigger them. That's going to be the goal next week. And thank you so much. So Aron, thank you for coming. FinSuite, good to see. Good to see OP Forum. Sunlinks, thanks for joining. Thanks, Steven. Have a good one. Colleen, good to see you again. And see you all next week, whether it's on my stream, Geo stream, or just out there in the Airtable having fun building. Don't hesitate to reach out if there are any questions. All right. Bye, everyone. Have a good one.